Welcome to Neurodiversity at 2:15, a weekly show where Eoin Stevens and myself, Vauna Beauvais, are chatting about neurodiversity over the coming weeks. And we've sent out invites to other counsellors and psychotherapists to join us if they want to. We didn't know whether anyone would come, but some have, and it's great to see you. So thanks for being here. This is new, and we don't know yet lots of things about it, and it might evolve and change over time. But to say that we will be responsive, actually, to what we think seems to be meeting people's needs. So feel free to interact with us. In fact, the more that you do that, the more we can make it something that we all benefit from. So the recording will be broadcast. So if you do comment, please refrain from referring to any current client. If you do talk about clients generally, as a population, make sure that no one can identify themselves. But be yourself, meet your own needs, get up, move around, do what you want to do. That's all good. In a moment, we're going to tell you what we are going to make this show be about and who it's for. But first of all, let's introduce ourselves. So let's hear a bit from Eoin Stevens.
Great, thanks, Vauna. So I'm Eoin, and I'm a therapist and trainer based in the Dublin area and involved in the field for over 30 years at this stage in various guises in training and private practice and addiction counselling. And I'm autistic, and I've known that for just over 10 years now. So this is why we're here, because myself and Vauna introduce herself in a minute, but this is what brought us together, is that we're both therapists, we're both neurodivergent, we're both working a lot with autistic clients and clients with ADHD and clients with both, and that all that combination that's emerging so much these days. And we're both very passionate about it and passionate about teaching about it. So that's what has brought us together, to plan some training, to start to, I suppose, bring our own discussions out a little bit further, because there's so much to talk about. This is just an area that we're all just on a massive learning curve around, learning all the time, new ideas emerging, new questions arising. What we're dealing with is just a massive growth in late discovery adult neurodivergence, autism and ADHD as being the two probably best known. And so, there's a big need for a response. And so, we're both, in a sense, keen to help, but also just very enthusiastic. As you'll see, we just love talking about all of this and teasing it out and trying to talk about what we're learning and what's puzzling us and what's helping our clients, and love to hear other ideas from other people. So hopefully we'll just open it up today, but there's lots of topics that we're hoping to talk about over the next few weeks.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously I'm Vauna Beauvais. I'm a psychotherapist, counsellor, coach. I've been seeing clients for well over 20 years. I work online with neurodivergent adult clients, and originally I trained in TA. I've done lots of other training. I became CTA in 2006, but as you do, you pick up other qualifications and trainings along the way. So I'd say that I'm pluralistic, really, in approach. I am an autistic person, also with ADHD, and I found out that I was autistic. Well, I've always been autistic, of course, but I've known and got that clarification since around 2010, whereas ADHD I've only known about for the last 5-ish years. So I thought that there was nothing more to look for once I'd found autism. I thought that explains everything. Well, it didn't. There was still some more things for me to know about. And now I feel very much in a better place. I understand myself, and the things I don't understand, or when there's something wrong, I know where to look for answers now, because I can look through the lens of neurodivergency, as well as all the other things that we know about well-being in human beings. So I know Eoin professionally, and we've been talking and thinking and getting heads together for quite a few years. And over the last year or so, we've been presenting and training.
Yeah, and as I said, we want to share that with more people, get discussions going, put out some ideas, but also get ideas from yourselves. So today we're just going to talk more generally about maybe some of the themes that are coming up that we can go into in more detail over the next few weeks. But we're very happy to be guided by yourselves. So please do put in the chat or email us later or whatever in terms of things that you would like to hear talked about a bit more. But there's lots of issues, as many of you may know if you're here. We're dealing with complex territory. For a start, there's simply the really important and vital shift from an old model to a newer model, from an old deficit-based medical type model to a neurodiversity-based type of model. But that's much more complex than simply saying those words. And so there's still a huge amount of teasing out, not only at a kind of a theoretical level, what does that actually mean? But in the therapy room, there's that whole kind of, battle between an official acceptance that we're talking about neurodivergence, not something that's wrong with you. We're talking about difference, completely mixed up with massive years and years of massive social messages, societal messages that says autism is actually a wrong thing to be. And something that gets teased and used as a term of abuse and a term of bullying. And so it's not easy for all of us individually and societally to make even that adjustment to, right, we all think neurodiversity model is a good thing. So there's masses to be looked at there. There's complex concepts like masking that we're still trying to fully tease out. What does it mean for somebody to be masking, to be camouflaging? There's all sorts of questions around well, what are ultimately going to be good outcomes for people who discover that they're autistic or have ADHD. So this is, as I said, it's kind of an informal teaching space, as in over the next few weeks we'll be bringing thoughts and ideas, but very much a joint learning space as well, as in every time we talk about this, we find we keep learning. So we will bring thoughts on some of the kind of topics I've been just mentioning. We'll mention a few more before we finish to whet your appetite, but also to give you the chance to feed back to us some of the things you might like to talk about over the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking as well to people who are watching the recording. We'd love you to keep coming back here, you people who are here today, but also if you're watching the recording, feel free to comment because we'll be reading the comments there as well. We're going to make the show relevant to health professionals, even though we're inviting anyone who's interested in this topic can listen to the recordings. But we're going to have the focus on understanding neurodivergent people through the lens of working with them, with the focus of working, improving well-being or quality of life. And we know that people have been misunderstood. Neurodivergent people historically and today are being misunderstood by professionals, by healthcare professionals. They're seen as too complicated sometimes. These are off-the-cuff comments, or neurodivergency is not significant, or I don't see you struggling, so I see you coping, so where's the problem? And they can be discarded or mistreated. We know that unmet support needs increase the risk of suicidality, and that there is a shortage of professionals who are trained in neurodiversity and mental health in healthcare settings, and there's a lack of support for professionals, you see. So this is part of that. There's a lack of support for professionals. So, we want therapists and healthcare professionals to feel supported and to feel confident when working well with the neurodivergent population, neurodivergent people.
And one of the many questions that's around at the moment is, what importance is there, what relevance is there to whether a therapist is neurodivergent themselves, and to the extent to which that matches? In other words, is it particularly helpful for an autistic client to see an autistic therapist? Is it vital? Is it not? Does it not matter so long as the therapist is, well informed and has a good understanding? There's no simple answer to that. And again, I think it's a topic to be discussed. But I think a good one to discuss, because again, people then can at least feel confident when it comes up as an issue. There does seem to be sometimes some advantages to that sort of click where, both therapists and clients have ADHD or both are autistic. But that doesn't mean it's necessary any more than it's necessary for a therapist and client always to have the same cultural background. If they have the same cultural background, well then there's maybe a little more of a click. You get off to a quicker start or something. Maybe there are less often things that need a little bit of extra explanation. I remember working in the addiction counselling field, and some people who are recovering from addiction would prefer a counsellor who is in recovery from addiction. But then that also assumes whether a counsellor is willing to say whether they are or aren't, which is after all a personal matter. So I think it's an interesting issue in the field. But the key thing is there's certainly no evidence that it's some sort of necessity. I don't think I never saw evidence that it was a necessity in the addiction field, for instance, and I don't see any evidence that it's a necessity in this area. Like, let all the non-autistic therapists step back and let the autistic therapists do all the work. That would be a pity. That would just be ghettoization. We don't have to share sexual orientation with the client to work with them. We don't even have to talk about what our sexual orientation is. So the big thing is growth and awareness. The big need is just that rapidly as possible, more and more therapists just become comfortable with this area, familiar with this area.
And have something to offer. Because as well, could it be that obviously if you are a neurodivergent person yourself and a therapist, that there's ways in which intuitively things can flow and you can be therapeutic because of having a match, say, in cognitive style and understanding. You might just intuitively know. Things like that. It can be advantageous in that intuitively there's an attunement and an understanding, but also we want to build on that and get it made overt. Put this into what are the things, not just intuitively doing it.
Yeah, I know. Name them, tease them out. Yeah, help everybody to be more comfortable in working with that. What is in a way then kind of a form of cross-cultural counselling, which obviously is in an area that is not new to therapists. I suppose it's very important at the moment that we emphasize the reality, the lived experience, the themes, the cognitive style, as you've said, Vauna. But in the midst of it, we also need to be careful not to lose sight of, well, actually autistic people are just humans, who also happen to be autistic, because it is interesting how easily that can seem to happen, that it's almost like, there's people and then there's autistic people who are some sort of squeezed down, narrower version who you can describe by listing out these 10 things, and of course, not only is that not true, but there's huge variety between autistic people, which brings us back to, it's not automatically going to be an autistic therapist that will help an autistic client. It's going to be a therapist that you get on with and that you click with, that you like to some extent and have some chemistry with, and they may be autistic, they may not. All autistic people don't get on with all autistic people. It's not as simplistic as that. So we are sort of sailing, kind of a fine line where we need to raise people's awareness around what it really is to be autistic without sort of somehow ghettoizing neurodivergent people. In the end of it all, communication is the top issue, really, isn't it?
Yeah, because especially if you're working with someone's well-being and mental health, that's what we do, isn't it? We're wanting to be able to share this, and understand a person's inner world as well as their external situations. It's not just the things; it's how they're impacting on the client and what's happening. So being able to communicate that, and that communication being received as it was intended to be received, and things like that. The backwards and forwards thing.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I'm involved in actual more formal training with therapists around this area, I'm always trying to, in a sense, be very encouraging, as in, the thing we're trained in is communication, and we're trained in to communicate well with a wide range of people. And all we're talking about here is just taking those skills for a particular population called neurodivergence and using those skills to, get to know somebody, but maybe with a little bit of dropping assumptions that we might have had and, just learning from scratch again. I often think the people who are nearly in the best position nowadays are the people who somehow manage to never hear anything about autism or ADHD up until this point in time, if that's possible, and they're just starting from scratch. The problem for most of us is that we heard lots about these things over many years, including even informal training, and a whole lot of it is inaccurate and distorted and wrong. Alison is saying there in the chat, I feel awareness raising is very important. I have experience where clients are discriminated against because their neurodiversity is misinterpreted. Yeah. And then if they make a request for their needs, they're seen as troublemakers, not making a reasonable access request. And clients talk about this. There's no point pretending otherwise. You mentioned it at the start, Vauna, and there's a chunk of research even on this at this stage where clients are saying, that they not only don't sometimes get understanding and interpretation, but they get misinterpretation, and they get misinterpretation that the therapist hangs on to, and they get made to feel more marginalized again, and made to feel, as they have often felt in their life, like a troublemaker, as Alison said. And we've got to change that. That's in a sense, our mission, if you like.
It reminds me, do you know what it reminds me of as well? When the term used to be used about challenging behaviours, and now healthcare professionals are not allowed to use that term. So because it's widely known now that these are displays of a person's distress, and so it's about interpreting communication, interpreting people, neurodivergent people have different ways of trying to show that they have got needs and that they want those needs to be met. Not everybody can articulate it. And I don't mean that some people can and some people can't. I mean, me personally, sometimes I can't and sometimes I can, articulate things in language or even know what I think or feel or need. And so challenging behaviours, a display of, that's it, like maybe an extreme version, but in the therapy room, we might see something in a smaller level. Instead of seeing it at face value, but let's interpret these things. Let's look through that neurodivergent lens, really.
And it reminds me, both what you're saying, Vauna, but also what you posted there, Alison. It reminds me of another big question that really we're only on the edge of. It might turn out to be not such a big question, but at the moment it's an unknown to a large extent. And that is, from a theoretical point of view, all the various theoretical approaches to counselling and therapy, psychotherapy, have been, attempting to be, and in a sense rightly, general about human beings in general. And big questions have been raised in recent decades, for instance, that given that most or all of these theories were invented in the Western world, are they entirely relevant to people outside the Western world? The same question applies. And again, the answer might simply be yes, but the same question applies when we're dealing with neurodivergent populations. Are there some ways in which some of those theories, attachment theory, various humanistic theories like person-centered therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, I do a bit of CBT, and I think sometimes that classic list of cognitive distortions, which is generally true of human beings, but does it apply in the same way to autistic people, or do we need to rejig it or rethink it a bit? Definitely. All the list of classic skills we learn, like reflecting and questioning and using silence and all that list, do they need a bit of a retweak in general or not? Maybe they don't, But I mean, those are just massive questions. I know this is some of the things that we have been talking about for years, isn't it? That we want to start talking about, and that we want to involve everybody to come together to talk about as well. And there's things about the crossover between gender variance and neurodiversity, the prevalence, and also, of course, the mental health statistics that we did that slide on in the last training session. Things like that, anxiety, how anxiety is a baseline state. Dr. Luke Bearden says that anxiety is a baseline state for autistic people. Why is that? We're human beings. We've got to start asking these questions
and finding out. And things like obsessions, fixations, social anxiety, these are all words that have been used that aren't particularly useful, because that's just a shorthand way of saying things about that person. And what are the things? What's going on for them? Let's start to understand.
Yeah. What are the actual precise experiences?
One of the key things that has been happening in the last couple of decades is an enormous number of narrative experiences of neurodivergent people have been not only brought into therapy rooms, but written up in blogs and in books and put out in various types of media. And that has, I think, really been part of what's woken us up to this reality.
But as we know as therapists, individual narratives aren't something that somebody just sits and figures out by looking inside themselves. They work it out in dialogue with other people, including therapists. And a classic example of that is what you're naming there, Vauna. It's like people don't necessarily know that they've been living continually with anxiety until they get to talk to somebody in detail about how that feels and how it feels not to. And then they realize, actually, now that you talk about it that way, I think I've been anxious all my life, but I wouldn't have been able to say that, so this is an ongoing big journey that we're all on. This isn't just like, now we have the information, let's give it to everyone. We're learning all the time, Neffy just saying, when my child was struggling at secondary school and I pushed for a dyslexia test as the school was accusing her of playing up, I felt very unsupported. I know it's very mixed, the experiences people are having around all of this, and I didn't know where to go for help. My child was diagnosed, but then I was told she was not bad enough to get support. Since then, I've worked with a number of parents who are having the same struggles. There's we're in a really in-between space at the moment, aren't we, historically, where officially this stuff is on the agenda, but in actual fact, people's experiences are very, very mixed. I don't know where you're based, Nadia. I mean, I'm in Ireland, but the Irish situation is very similar to what I hear in the UK. Very, very patchy and mixed experiences that people are having, unfortunately. So sorry to hear that. So we're sort of we're coming up towards our finish time. So I don't know if anyone has any last comments or whether you want to wrap it up in any way.
I mean, we're just opening it up. That's the point, is that there's so much to open up, so we can happily finish thinking, well, we're going to come back to more stuff next time, so we hope to see you there. But is there anything you want to add as a wrap up? Maybe name a few topics we might come back to.
I was just thinking of doing that, throwing things in, such as grief, masking, obviously, looking at that in more detail. It's not just a behavior, identity, true vulnerability, and being on the receiving end of predatory behavior. Why is that? Why does that happen? It's a common theme. And shame as well. Betrayal, relationships, boundaries, burnout, self-help, self-hate sometimes, codependency, addictions, the therapeutic relationship. We could talk a lot about that, not repeating in the therapeutic dyad of what is, been happening in society, in a relationship with society or other people. Trauma, bereavement, how neurodivergent people may or may not respond to being impacted by bereavement differently to what a person might expect and what their needs might be. Anger, isolation, dissociations as well, all kinds of imposter syndrome. That's, and then obviously with ADHD, we've got all kinds of things such as impulsivity. And the thing is like, they can read this stuff on the internet. It's not difficult. But what we're trying to do here is say, why is that? How is it relevant to us as healthcare professionals? What does it actually look and sound like in the actual room when you're talking to a real person, not a list of things that you're seeing on the internet?
And, I think that's what struck me most in what the list you read out there. I think definitely, we should, in one of the sessions now in the next few weeks, we should focus very strongly on the therapeutic relationship and our experience of it. And, we're in touch with other therapists who are working a lot in this field. And, some of you may be doing some of this kind of work even. But to talk more about, what's the growing what are people saying about the therapeutic experience of, because I'm working almost entirely with autistic and some ADHD clients. Very few of my clients now are not exploring that area. So so to talk more, both of us, about, and in general, about what that experience is, would be a great piece to talk about. Okay.
Yeah, so we'll round it up on that piece then. So thank you, Eoin. Thanks for being here, and thank you all for being here as well.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again. We'll be here the next few weeks anyway at this time. Okay.
Yeah, and if you want to find more about us, look on Vanguard Neurodiversity Training.com. You can look up Eoin Stevens and myself on LinkedIn. Feel free to link up with us. We'd like you to do that.
Great stuff. Take care all. Bye-bye.
Thanks.